Welcome back for the sixth and final round of the Maritime Open chess tournament. This has been a great tournament so far. I have played the first 5 rounds and so far have 3.5 points, and I am ready for the last one. I am playing this last round against an opponent who has pretty much the exact same rating level as me, just 2 points off. And I've been kind of feeling like, in general, I've been playing above my level in this tournament, so I feel like I'll probably have pretty good chances in this last game. But of course, let's not take anything for granted. Let's play as well as I can and see how it goes. I'm playing with the white pieces, and so I played e4, and finally I get to play against a Sicilian. I haven't played against a Sicilian all tournament. And I was kind of interested to try because I had just learned a little bit about the Grand Prix Attack. And I have a video, which I'll link to in the description, where I kind of go over some of the basics of the Grand Prix Attack. Now, I don't actually know a lot of the theory with the Grand Prix Attack, but I have played it a bit and I know the general ideas, which you'll see some of them in this game as well. But it kind of makes for interesting attacking games, which tend to work well for the way I like to play. And so here we go, Grand Prix Attack. I wasn't quite sure if I was ready to play it in a tournament game yet, but I decided, all right, last round, let's try it out. So, Black plays d6, and then bishop here. So Black has been, one thing that Black has been doing is kind of delaying putting this knight out, which often in the Grand Prix Attack, I like to develop this bishop to b5 and pin that knight and then potentially actually trade off the bishop for that knight, because I'm going to end up putting lots of pawns on light squares and maybe this one eventually as well. So trading off my light squared bishop doesn't hurt. But bishop c4 is also perfectly fine. And white develops, I push d3, and we both castle. And this is a pretty typical standard sort of position for the Grand Prix. Finally, Black brings out the knight to c6, and I put my queen on e1. And as you'll see in my other video about the Grand Prix, this is a very common idea for this opening, eventually bringing the queen over to h4 and pushing this pawn, having the bishop come in, having the knight come in, having the rook come in, like just really causing lots of pressure on the king side and attacking over there. Black played knight d4, which I wasn't quite sure about, but I felt like I didn't really want Black to be the one calling the shots, so I captured, damaging the structure somewhat, bringing the knight back to add some immediate pressure, and then Black played e5. And I figure I can leave this tension here at this point because Black really doesn't want to capture with that pawn. That'll just leave really nasty doubled isolated pawns on the d file. So instead, I played knight g3. Now, I've labeled knight g3 to be a mistake. It might be just more of an inaccuracy, to be honest, but I felt like I wanted to launch a kingside attack, and so I wanted this knight to be part of the attack. I wanted it just to be over on this side of the board. The problem is this knight can't really do anything. Like, this g-pawn is just completely covering any of those knight's forward moving squares. And then the knight actually gets in the way of my queen. Like, my queen can't go over to g3 or h4 because the knight is in the way. And so really what would have been better is actually to bring the queen out somewhere like h4, maybe even g3 first before doing anything with this knight. Because right now this knight can just kind of hang out there and it's totally fine, actually. So that was a bit of a mistake, and it made things kind of awkward trying to get this attack rolling. But we carried on, bishop e6, and then I moved the bishop back so that if they capture, I can at least open up this rook. I was actually seeing this hilarious line where if I capture and then they take back with the f pawn, and then eventually I push, then this pawn has actually just like zigzagged around the knight into this much nicer position, actually, and Black would be feeling quite good here. I wonder if the engine likes that. Yeah, the engine says it's pretty close to being equal, maybe a little bit better for white. But anyway, I didn't want that pawn to just be able to zigzag around to f5. So I moved the bishop back. And then they moved the knight back, and this kind of forced my hand a little bit. I knew that eventually I wanted to push f5, and I think I'm probably feeling ready to do so at this point. But I realized that if I want to do that, I pretty much have to, because otherwise black is going to have the opportunity to push a pawn to f5. So I did that right now. We traded the bishops. And then black played d5, which at first glance, I was like, this doesn't look like the right move. Like this doesn't look, this structure just doesn't look as good as, you know, when the pawn was back here. However, it is actually kind of annoying, despite how it looks. Black is basically trying to sort of undermine my structure. And if they capture here and I capture here, then this pawn, it's not a passed pawn, but it kind of has more opportunities. And I don't want them to maybe be able to isolate that pawn and so on. What I eventually realized, though, is I actually can just leave the tension, because if they capture, then I actually can just capture with the knight. That actually puts the knight on a much nicer square than what it is right now. And this pawn is still very adequately protected. And potentially I can even push that pawn, and then it's also protected by my knight, which would be interesting. So I left the tension and decided I need to complete my development. I need to get my bishop out. And this actually comes with a threat, because if I put the bishop on b4, then this rook is trapped. And so seeing that, my opponent moved the knight. I brought the bishop to b4, they moved the rook, and I put my queen on f2. So I've been struggling to get my queen anywhere useful because of this dumb knight move that blocked the queen from going over here to help with this attack. But I felt like putting the queen on f2 was nice, because now I can potentially capture with this pawn and then get the queen up onto the f7 square to cause some problems for black. And so in response, black played a move which I think was a mistake. Black played bishop h6. And actually, this was one of those ones where I was trying to figure out the point of this move, and I didn't quite understand it. And so I kind of started looking around for things that I could play. And it actually took me a while of calculating before I realized that there is a nasty tactic that they're setting up for here, putting the bishop on e3 and winning my queen. And so it was one of those times when I kind of felt stupid because of how long it took me to find this. But then once I found it, I'm like, okay, well that changes, you know, how I'm gonna handle this position. So I'm glad that I did find it. And so I thought about it, and eventually I put my bishop back on d2. And the reason is this covers this square so that the tactic no longer works for black. And one of the ideas in the Grand Prix attack is you want to get rid of this dark squared bishop, because it's an important defender of the dark squares around the king. And so often you do actually try to trade it off with your own dark squared bishop, and then you can launch your attack a little more effectively. So I offered a bishop trade, and then black made what I think was a second inaccuracy. They accepted the trade. And so now the dark squares around the king are pretty weak, and I'm going to work on exploiting them. In fact, I'm potentially going to push that pawn, bring the queen, and try to go for a checkmate. There are lots of ways that black can prevent this, but that's kind of the idea that I'm going to go for. So seeing what I wanted to do, they moved their queen and brought it to defend the dark squares around the king. I pushed that pawn. Maybe not the best move, actually, but I felt like I wanted to get this threat going and kind of force black into a pretty defensive position. And so queen f8 and then queen g5. And part of the point of this move actually was to pin this pawn so that maybe I could do something with this knight, something a little more useful. I was actually even considering trying to put the knight there somehow and cause some grief for black. One thing I didn't see, I guess maybe I can't do this yet. Yeah, I can. One thing I didn't see is that I could actually capture with that pawn now and then put this knight on a really nice square. So this comes a little bit later, but I'm just realizing that this was possible even in this position. We do a bunch of other things first, but this would have been possible right here and maybe would have been a good move. But I played queen g5 instead. And then black started trying to attack this pawn, and they have some good resources for doing so. They can bring that knight as well. And so I did a rook lift with the idea of potentially doubling up my rooks to defend this pawn. Maybe if that knight moves eventually, then this rook isn't going to go there, but could go to h3. King h8, removing this pin, so now this knight is useless again. And then I decided, all right, let's push this h pawn and start trying to break up the defensive pawns around the king. After h6, my queen had to slide back, and then knight e8, again trying to win this pawn. I bring over my rook, and then they bring over their second rook, trying to go to d6 and again put even more pressure on this pawn. And this is when I realized, okay, I can add a defender to this pawn and get my knight on a better square if I just capture here. And that's what I did, and I put the knight right there. And this felt pretty good. It felt like I had finally solved the problem of that knight that I had put on the wrong square, like way back on, what, move 11. And now this is move 27. So the knight has sat there for 16 moves, just being in the way and kind of useless. So finally I've solved the problem of my knight. They moved the rook to b5, and I was confused about this during the game, but it's because they wanted to get the rook onto this onto the 6th rank to attack this pawn, and that's the only square that works. If they go there, my knight captures them. If they go there, then when they go there, my knight actually has a fork of the two rooks, and they can't go there, of course, right away because of that knight. So going here and then here is the only way that they can do that. So they did that, and then I went ahead and pushed h5. So I wasn't sure that this worked, because I was pretty sure they were going to push g5, and now it looks like things are just pretty locked up on the king side. The engine says that this is still +2, so white is still doing pretty well. I was seriously considering, if they did that I might just sacrifice my knight and then grab the second pawn with the queen, bring the rook either here or here, and try for an attack. I'm not sure that it would have worked. In fact, just looking at the engine, no, I don't think the engine likes it like that. Yeah, that actually, you can see the eval bar just kind of plummet there. So that wouldn't have worked. You know, maybe it would have worked in practical play at our level, but instead of that, my opponent made a game-losing blunder. They sort of got tunnel vision and decided, all right, I'm just going to go ahead with my attack on this pawn, and basically didn't realize the strength of me capturing on g6, which is what I did. I captured with the pawn and then picked up another pawn with my queen here. And now the game is over, basically. Like, according to the engine, it's +8. Yeah, +8. It's really bad for black at this stage. And so black tried for some play here, try to I don't know, get rid of that or put the knight here to defend or something. And then I found this nice tactic where I'm hitting the rook, and black can't actually capture, because then it's just mate in a couple of moves. I put the rook there, and then I take, and it's checkmate. So I played knight g5, and black also, there's also this checkmate threat, so black has to do something about that, and black put the queen on g8. And then I decided, all right, I'm going to capture the queen, and then after the king takes, then I win the rook, and probably I'm going to push this pawn and win the game fairly quickly. In this position, my opponent resigned. It turns out, actually, I missed a mate in 2 in this position. I could have had a forced checkmate in 2 moves. So see if you can find it. Leave a comment down below if you find what the correct move for white here to get a forced checkmate in 2. But this move also works. It's still like +10 according to the engine. And as I said, in this position, black resigned. So this was the last game of the tournament, and I won, which means I ended the tournament with 4.5 points out of 6, which I'm quite happy with. Let me just switch my browser over here real quick, and I will show you some of the results. So it was the 2024 Maritime Open Challengers. There was also the championship section, which were higher rated players, but I played in the Challenger section. As I said, I got 4.5 out of 6. And my rating jumped up pretty substantially. So my rating was 1543, and this is CFC, Chess Federation of Canada. And I actually played at a performance rating of 1809, which is the highest performance rating I've ever had for a tournament. So I'm quite happy with that. And I think like when you get a sort of a highest rating for the first time, there's like bonus points that you get. So this was quite a big jump by about 140 points, which makes me kind of expect that 1683 might be a bit higher than my actual level. I'll be playing another tournament in a few weeks, so we'll see kind of how things go then. I sort of expect that my rating might kind of go down and kind of hover in the mid 1600s for a little bit until I start to improve a little bit more. But overall, I'm very happy with it. And I actually, let's see if I can see this here. I actually was in a 3-way tie for second place in my section, which I was quite happy about. Peter McKean won this tournament, and actually we played a rapid tournament the evening before the classical started, and Peter and I played a game in that tournament, and I actually won against him, mainly because he used up too much time and flagged. But so yeah, I'm very happy with how this tournament went. Let me switch my camera back here. And it was a really good one. Shout out to Fred and the other organizers who put all of this together. It was a fantastic tournament. I think something like 100 players over the course of the weekend. There were a few different tournaments, a few rapid ones, a blitz one, a junior one for some of the younger kids. Some of them, I didn't play in all of them because some of them you had to take a bye from the classical tournament in order to play in the rapid tournament. So I just played the rapid tournament that was the night before, which was a great sort of warm up. And then I played the classical, but lots of fun, really great venue, really great tournament, and had some really good players there too, a few IMs and an FM and so on. So I hope you enjoyed those video recaps of the 6 rounds of the Maritime Open this year. I'll be hoping to take it on again next year, and I also have another tournament, as I mentioned, just in a few weeks. And otherwise, I'll be shooting some more videos pretty soon on some other things that I'm learning along the way. So I hope you enjoyed these videos. I hope you learned something. Leave a comment if you want to give me any sort of ideas or have any questions about any of these videos. And I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.